Good evening. Welcome to the Oconee County Board of Commissioners meeting. Today is Tuesday, October the 29th, 2024. After a moment of silence, we're going to ask Mark Thomas to lead us in the pledge. Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item of business is to approve the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Excuse me.
Oh.
I forgot. Yeah. Would ask for an amendment to the agenda under number 5, which would be to discuss and consider the Parks and Rec custodial services contract. You're all right with that for the motion? With that, Chuck?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next item is statements and remarks from citizens. This is for anything not on tonight's agenda. These statements and remarks from commissioners. I want to announce we still have committee applications open for May Courts, Board of Health, Farmland Preservation, and Oconee County Library Trustee Board. We'll be making these appointments in December. So if you have any interest in those committees, we ask that you go to our website and fill out the application. I want to thank everybody who's participated in early voting so far. The numbers as of tonight are we're at 57.75%, which makes us number 2 in the state for turnout so far. So call everybody know. I want to be number 1 before we get done. So we got Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 8 to 5, and then of course Election Day, 7 to 7. We have a very special guest with us today, and we're going to do a proclamation honoring Civic Center Director Sean Wheeler. I'm going to ask Commissioner Saxon to read that proclamation.
Proclamation, October 29th, 2024. Whereas Sean Wheeler has diligently served as the Oconee County Civic Center's first and only director for the past 32 years, leading the Civic Center to become a focal point of arts and community culture. And whereas Sean graduated from the University of Georgia's Grady School of Journalism in 1981, and worked in UGA's Office of Student Affairs for 12 years as a student activity technical director and later as a student counselor. And whereas, while at UGA, Sean was asked to consult on design and building of a performing arts theater and community center for Oconee County. And whereas, Sean joined the county as a Civic Center director in 1993 at a time when performing arts in the county included 1 dance school, church choirs, school bands and courses, and a drama club at Oconee County High School. And whereas, since Sean has been at the helm of the Civic Center, drama and dance programs at both high schools have been established, 5 dance academic schools have opened, and 4 community theater groups have started. And the Oconee County Civic Center has served as a venue for all of them. And whereas Sean will retire from his role at the Oconee County Civic Center in November 2024, at which time he plans to work on his house, travel with his wife, and spend time with his son, daughter, and grandchild. Now, therefore, be resolved that Oconee County Board of Commissioners commends Sean Wheeler for his foundational work and leadership in the Oconee Civic Center, recognizes his lasting legacy as the Civic Center, at the Civic Center and in the performing arts in our community, and does hereby proclaim Tuesday, October 29th, 2024, as Sean Wheeler Day in Oconee County, Georgia. Signed, Oconee County Board of Commissioners, John Daniel, Chairman.
Mhm. Thank you.
Then we got Star. Star came in. It has been a pleasure all the years. I want you to know, somebody called me to the county government, asked me to write you. And you applied for the job. I said, I do everything you can do. I'm writing that.
Now we're gonna move into the discussion about some possible updates to the alcohol ordinance. As you know, when we went through the comprehensive plan, we put out some questions to the community about some possible changes in certain areas. And so we're just gonna kind of talk through some of those tonight, make sure there's consensus with the board on how to move forward, so Daniel can finalize. You've got a draft for us to take home tonight and study as well. I guess the question, Daniel, does this ordinance have to be advertised for a certain amount of time and then voted on, or is this one that can?
You know, our rules of procedures say that we do it a certain way. They also say you can do it however you need to do it. I know we've got applications coming up and all that kind of thing. So the board could move faster if it chose to. Our normal process would be to advertise it.
Okay. First thing I guess we should talk about is brew pubs and distillery pubs. I don't know if it's such thing as a, but that was one of the questions that was put out in our comprehensive plan. It was very overwhelming response that those would be acceptable to the community. Yes, Daniel, talk to us a little bit about distillery type stuff and how that works.
Started working on this. Brew pubs were a little simpler to accommodate under our ordinance, and that's what I have in the draft for you to look at. And my thought is, let's try brew pubs first, see how that kind of works, and do like we've always done with our alcohol ordinance, which is make incremental changes. We can put distilleries into this, but that's kind of you get into different kind of thing, I think, when you do distilleries. And you know, we did beer and wine, then we did distilled spirits. It makes sense to me that we try brew pub first and then move to distillery. I know there's probably a demand for brew pubs now from developers, people that have it. Distilleries, maybe not.
Any thoughts from the group on that?
I'm lost. Is there an example of a brew pub already around?
Wire Park, I think that's probably close.
Is that what that is? So they actually make their beer out there?
Yeah, they brew the beer, they sell it. They can also sell it under state rules, and that's why I drafted this. They can also sell to a wholesale. So like, if they have a creature conference in downtown Athens, they have a venue where they do some food, they do some beer.
Mhm.
But they're really selling to a wholesaler who's then selling.
All right. So the one out at Wire Park, would it fit under this ordinance or not?
So the problem with that as versus our ordinance and the way we've approached it is the food sales.
Okay.
So I haven't changed that. We still have the 75% food sales component in here, but it doesn't, any wholesale sales beer do not count toward that. So it's just what happens a brew pub is a restaurant.
Okay.
And you'll see as you go through here, there are definitions, and I've actually made that license a subclass of our restaurants that can sell beer license before.
I don't want to get ahead of myself, but how does this fit into the agritourism policies that the state has?
But we're not touching farm winery, so they can do whatever it is the state lets them do. We've got a couple here. So we're not in conflict. We're maybe not 100% engaged, but we're, whatever the state wants to do on that, we're saying.
We made a conscious effort to stay out of the farm winery, for Department of Ag and the Department of Revenue. So right now, we do, like Daniel said, we have two operating that are totally licensed by those two groups. I believe they're doing pretty well.
Yeah, and-
haven't had any problems.
And the issue is, if we start regulating them, we're gonna run afoul of our service area map. Because the state can allow them to be in places that we wouldn't allow them to be, and we don't have any real say-so about that. So then it raises a host of issues about where does our service area map extend to. Yeah, I will say that I added in the ordinance also fair amount of administrative procedure. There were a couple of ordinances I looked at that had some really good things about reporting and auditing that I added kind of to help us. Up the penalty amount. Holly had pointed out that our penalty doesn't really encourage anybody to do anything on time, so I've made that a little stiffer. Let's see, we've the big one, of course, is changing the issuance of the license to an administrative process and moving from the clerk to the planning. So that's, hopefully I got all that. And then I told John, I'm not comfortable that we've solved a lot of the little minor issues, but I'm gonna work on that over the next week or so. Things that Holly and I have talked about over the years that don't work as smoothly as they.
As for the percentages, how does it look when those folks turn in their documentation as to our restaurants now that serve alcohol? How is that 75-25 look?
Working. So we checked that this afternoon. That we have one restaurant that consistently hits in 21%. And then there's a couple others that'll hit that 21% on a sporadic basis. So there's only 3 restaurants. The highest it's been was 22%. So we don't have any, but that's the closest we are to hitting the 25%.
Let me make sure, like on Wire Park, do they serve food?
No.
They have some type of arrangement where they count the other restaurants' sales. They pool those people that are in the food court. I'm not proposing that we do that. Ours would be more standalone, I think. But they take, as I understand it, their concept is, if you take what, and I can't think of the name of it, but their brew pub sells, and you take what the restaurants sell that are around it, you pour it all in together, that's how they look at their procedure. So,
Who came up with that?
well, I did.
I know you didn't. That seems interesting. So they're using one of the other restaurants' figures.
Because they have a food court, I think it's the idea.
Okay, whatever. Okay. All right.
Another thing to talk about in this item is movie theater. If you remember, when we first had the alcohol ordinance, when the university theater came in, after they'd been here a year or two, they wanted to sell alcohol there. And it was tricky. They had the restaurant part, so they're kind of limited to only 1 or 2 theaters where they can serve the alcohol. They're asking for an adjustment since we're looking at the ordinance now. And their suggestion would be just to have a movie theater definition and allow that to be them to sell alcohol for all theaters that are open at the time.
And I don't have that in there.
No, yeah.
Oh,
But
you don't?
that's
Okay.
not, yeah.
What I did put in there, and Guy and I talked about this in the context of grocery stores, is a provision that says you can have a restaurant inside of another business. So for example, if Publix wanted to have a restaurant inside of their grocery store, they could do that, right, under the revision. They still have to meet all the requirements, but you read our ordinance now, you kind of think, oh, that almost looks like it has to be a standalone. That was what was tricky about the movie theater, but I clarified that.
The move to the planning department, I assume, is that for staffing reasons? I mean, or time management? What's the impetus for moving, other than Holly doesn't want to do it?
Guy was excited and asked for it. He did not. I was like, guy was excited and asked for it.
Oh,
He did not.
I didn't think so.
No, planning is just virtue. It's a customer service relation function. Planning has a counter with a customer service window. It's just for customer convenience. And honestly, at this point, it's more of a licensing and ministerial function rather than a board function. Is where we're trying to go with it. So it just lives more logically where business license, occupational taxes would go as opposed to something for the board.
In the administrative process of it too, code enforcement already had responsibilities for inspections and that kind of thing. So it kind of made sense to move it. And Melissa, I did put a provision in that says the finance department has some power in auditing and looking at accounts and requiring reports and things like that, which might be helpful.
So if there's a violation of the ordinance, that would be handled, totally then with staff as a violation in the ordinance, or is there any, revoking the license, does that take place under their administrative?
You still have an administrative hearing officer that has to hear it because there are due process requirements if you're going to revoke the license.
Okay.
But we kept the two avenues that you go under. You can either go through the magistrate court, criminal process, or you can do both. Or you go through the civil process and fines and suspension of the license.
But this body has suspended the license, hasn't it, recently?
Yes. Well, no, the administrative hearing officer did.
Oh, okay. But we get involved in it because
It could be appealed to the board, I think.
that's what I'm getting at.
But it hadn't been,
Okay.
not in a very long time. I did put a provision in that if you suspend the license till the end of the year, that's the same thing as revoking the license. It's the issue we had last year.
Now, as far as the service areas, I have a particular question about that because we have development that has, I think, at least one or maybe two restaurants that are kind of on the bubble, so to speak. And does this address any changes to how that operates?
It doesn't change how it operates, but it would incorporate any new service map that's been prepared.
Okay. So if I push for a change in that service area, would it be in conjunction with this or a separate matter?
I would think we'd do it at the same time.
Okay.
It's actually an attachment, it's an appendix to this ordinance, that shows that, so that was one of the questions. Stops at Malcolm Bridge, that's been the one that was requested. We talked about expanding the service areas, not being specific, but that would seem acceptable during the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
Update and community inputs.
Well, I know those predated my time going on the board, and I understand there's a reason why there was service areas, put in place. But those places that they have to be zoned either B1 or B2 currently?
I believe that's right.
Okay. So all the service areas that we have, the zones for those areas are just that, B1 or B2. They're not some other zoning.
I don't know the answer.
I just didn't know if there was going to be any changes to that aspect of the ordinance as far as the service areas, if it's still something we want to do, or if this is something we're going to want to change.
That's kind of why we're having this meeting, is kind of talk about that. Personally, I don't have a problem with amending the service area map to include that area. We've not changed it since the ordinance was originally adopted. So it's not a frequent request. And it was made, when it was originally made, we just told the person that was asking that we would address that concept. Because it's a lot bigger than just alcohol. It's about zoning. So we did it through the comprehensive plan.
Right.
So
Well, I, just off the top of your head, Chairman, do you recall that, we did a rezone out there next to the park on Highway, 53? And I think, was it going to include, is that inside a service area? I can't remember the map right off the top of my head.
where that office was going to go.
No, where the retail, the
That OVP?
next to the one that Mark Jennings crowd did, the rezone.
I don't recall off the top of my head.
Okay,
One of those emails has the service area map in it.
okay.
We can, put it up next time we talk about it, and look at the detail about it.
Well, that was where I was headed. If we as this body approve a rezone and they're calling for it to have a beer and wine or whatever, and it's not in the service area, should we not change that at that time instead of waiting till,
I think the service areas were done originally just because it was new. There was a lot of concern through the community about how things could go bad.
yeah,
I believe most of the major corridors are included in the foreign zone.
Right.
And so I think the original map was pretty strong at hitting the right areas. This is kind of a one-off, and I don't know how many of those exist. I guess my concern would be if you just do away with the map, say B1 and B2, you can serve alcohol. We may need more time before we do that to clean up some stuff. We
Okay.
have some, so like in the past, we've had event venues that had to be zone B1 because there was no other place to put them. Now we have agritourism, and we can move those B1s to agritourism, but right now, there's a spot on 53 that's B1 in the middle of all that ag.
yeah.
So technically, that could turn into a restaurant serving alcohol. I don't know if we want to do that, but that's the downfall in just doing away with the pouring zones right away.
I'm just asking a question because, these things come up and like you said, it's a one-off sort of situation. But I guess my point is if we're going, as this body makes a conscious decision to approve a rezone and they said they're going to have restaurants and if they're not already in a service area, should we not go ahead and address that at the time of the rezone or I'm just talking.
Well,
I'm not-
probably so, but I mean, there's still a lot of restaurants that don't serve alcohol, so
Yeah,
that's definitely something that needs to be discussed. In the past, that's not occurred in any, like I said, it's a one-off, it just
Okay.
got missed. I think some of that zoning was done, I can't remember how the timeline went.
04, 05. Well, I came on most of all the MPDs, if you go back to the Malcolm Bridge thing, that was part of one of the original MPDs, if I'm not mistaken.
So it may have just been a mistake in the original map. I think that was for retail the whole time, so I can't really answer how it happened, but
I'm not worried about what we did. I'm just was thinking about in the future, if we have or presented with a rezone request for a development that's planning on serving alcohol, but it's not in the service area
just address it at that.
at that time. I mean, I guess I could bring, if I'm still on the commission, I guess I can bring it up at that time, all right?
Yes.
All right, I will.
So we may want to look at a different way to adjust the map besides it being part of the ordinance. I don't know. Where a separate action of the board can change the foreign zone or you're still talking, by the time you advertise, it, you're talking to 30, so, I don't know.
It's still an action report in play.
Okay.
Well, if we're making these changes, I'm just trying to see if there was a better way. But,
We could build a process into the ordinance that had a, abbreviated path for changing the map, I think. We could say something like, in the event there's a rezone, where the request may appear in line, that the board, by its action at the rezone, can also amend the service area. We could do something like that.
Well, because this development was approved, what, two or 3 years ago, so we've known it's been coming. The shops at Malcolm Bridge. And, so. Thank you. I've answered my question. Appreciate that.
One of the notes I had, Daniel, our fees and stuff are actually published in the ordinance. Should we look at maybe that being part of our fee schedule at budget time? Yeah, that way we don't have to change the ordinance and it needs to be adjustment.
And some of them I was looking at, for comparison, that I could copy good divisions, do it that way. They just say it could be set out in their fee schedule. That's an easy change if y'all want to do that.
So I make myself clear, the shops at Malcolm Bridge are gonna be, we're gonna reincorporate that, incorporate that.
That's the that if we have consensus, we can go ahead and make that change to the map, make it be part of this.
Yeah, I think we ought to go ahead and make that decision. If that's what
The objection.
it's gonna lead to as well.
That's the only thing we have on the table as far as I know.
Yeah.
Related to that. When we take care of that problem, we can figure out how to move forward on a long-term basis.
Right, I'm just gonna say, I think you're gonna see more of that where the developer, I'm not faulting, their business model, whatever, but if they get something, and we've all been through rezones, they say a lot of things about how things gonna look, and we're gonna do this, and then all of a sudden, well, I got somebody, that I'm fixing to sign a contract with, on lease, but they need alcohol. That's the way it normally is gonna go. And my thing is how we deal with that, because look at Parkside. I don't know if the current developers are going to try to sell that to somebody else. But you're not gonna have 40, 50 acres out there that's in commercial and somebody not ask for alcohol sales.
Right, so in the past, when most people, this is kind of one-off where they came and asked for it in that zone, knowing. I guess the question is, do you want that to come back for this board and be addressed, or do you just want it to be, if you're B1, B2, you go do what you want to do, and that's kind of that's what makes me just a little bit nervous. This ordinance has worked so well over the years. And I think because of the way it was done, we've had very few problems at all. And I just don't want us to swing the pendulum too far in one direction. That's just my.
And I respect that. I don't know exactly right, but you know as well as I do, they're gonna come. That's too much of it out there sitting, just somebody pushing fast food.
Right. I agree, and in the past, we've had the will to say no to some of that stuff, whether, when they're trying to change after the fact, change the rezone. We got some lawsuits to prove.
Yeah, I know. I've been on a bunch of them, but anyway, that just,
Mr. Chairman, I did have to pull up the service map and it is included, so it's a mute point about parks.
so this is part of.
Yeah, I assume that's what,
Yes. Hash marks.
yeah. It's right up to the park, doesn't include the park.
We may need to fix that. That's some concession stand.
Bet you
That's
knew
right.
this.
There was some
So, Mr.
conversation.
Chairman, if what you're suggesting is that we lay this on the table and put it out there for public review, or?
I think reading through Daniel's adjustments, maybe we just chat about it next week, just real quickly. Read through it, we're okay with everything Daniel has, and then we'll start the process with advertising, posting online, and getting public comment on it. Just
Well-
make sure that that's addressing everything, all the concerns everybody had.
Okay.
It was,
As far as the pressure point on this is the, service area, is that gonna take a whole nother month, or is that something that we can deal with a little quicker?
that's what he was talking about, that our normal procedure would be to advertise that, so it'd be the December meeting. However, we had the ability to vote on it at our this whole ordinance at November meeting, if that's the will of the board.
Well, I'm talking about the service area change, not the ordinance itself. Is that handled separately? I mean, if we weren't dealing with doing the ordinance, what's the procedure for changing the service area?
It's an amendment to the ordinance, so it's the same process.
Okay.
A couple other specific items that were mentioned were, right now, Sunday sales start at 12:30. There's interest in moving that to 11 a.m. Is that in the change? So that's something for everybody to think about. If there's concern with that.
Does that line up with the state,
Yes.
It was the brunch bill.
the brunch bill?
Right.
Okay.
And then
Is that just at, restaurants, or is that also at the grocery store?
that'll be everybody.
Everybody?
Even playing field with start time. And then just a question on administrative hearing officer. You know, we had trouble in the past finding one. We've got one now, but it says it has to be an attorney. Is that necessary? And then I guess really the real question is, this is a county ordinance. Would that not just go through magistrate court and take a step out of the process here?
Well, the reason we had the administrative hearing officer, get it out of criminal standards.
Okay.
And get it into civil standards. Does the administrative hearing officer have to be a lawyer? No. Makes sense.
Okay.
Because you've got evidentiary requirements and all that, but it doesn't have to.
Everybody's okay with taking a look at Daniel's revisions? Think about things we talked about it. We'll bring it up to the next meeting and discuss.
And I'll try and send this out electronically as soon as my IT guy figures out what the dickens is going on with my email and, server connection, which should be in the morning.
So let me make sure I understand, at what point in this process I make a motion to amend the service areas to include the shops at Malcolm Bridge? Is that next week at a regular meeting?
Well, the normal way y'all would do this is go over to your meeting next week. Could even treat that as a first reading, and then at the December meeting, you'd be able to act on it.
All right, so do we need to, I don't know how my fellow commissioners are going to, respond. Do we need to give some direction tonight, or do we wait till next Tuesday to give you that direction?
I think next Tuesday's fine. That's part of the point of bringing it up tonight, I think, so that you got really 4 meetings, but at least 3 meetings.
Well, I just, if nobody else is interested in doing it, I don't want to put you to any more trouble than you're already going to.
Well, the service area map's easy. I mean, it's whatever y'all attach to it. I don't even have to change anything in the ordinance for that, right?
I don't think there's any problem with the service area amendment that we're talking about
Okay,
passing from my conversations. I think we're good.
okay.
It's just a matter of, do we want to break our procedure to do that early?
I'm not I mean, I just want to make sure I understand, because, the communications I've had with the citizen, they're interested in, the outcome. And they're also interested in the timeline.
Right.
Let me ask, when would the public have a chance at least to be? Because this is, this is a big deal.
Yep. So we come back next Tuesday and have consensus on the changes that are here. whatever discussion changes need to be made, we'll post it the next day and start the advertisement in the paper. And so when we get to our November work session, that'll be first reading, second reading will be the December meeting and vote. All right, everybody good with that process?
I got three things I want to ask. For one, we had a prospect that was coming in that was a grocery store that wanted to sell beer, inside the grocery store as the patrons were going through. Does this address any of that?
They'd have to have the restaurant. Still be required to have the restaurant. And that,
So if they have a deli inside,
that'll be a restaurant. And they still have to meet the 75-25 rule. Sales generated within that restaurant. That was several years ago when that was being looked at. And we had it kind of figured out. And then that grocery store decided not to come. I think Daniel's it was kind of vague. That's why Daniel's added that restaurant within another building or business. Kind of clarify that. It would still have to be operated as a restaurant.
so the restaurant requirements that they have at Wire Park, that's a city.
Right.
As opposed to a county.
That's correct.
Just want to make sure everybody understands that. Okay. The other thing is on the license approvals. I know sometimes if you've got a new business that comes in the middle of the year, and in the past we did a blanket approval. Are we going to do still individual licenses as they come in the year?
So as it's written now, that will not be voted on by the Board of Commissioners. That will be an administrative decision. If you meet these criteria, we're going to issue the license. For some reason, guys group decides not to issue the license, there's an appeal process. Is that through the board or through the hearing officer?
Got to come to the board, man.
Okay. So for some reason that alcohol license gets denied, they can appeal to the Board of Commissioners for a hearing. Otherwise, we won't vote on it again unless somebody appeals.
And if somebody comes in the middle of the year, they get a prorated fee and they can apply and get up and running.
So it'll be a little quicker, it'll be much more streamlined than what we're doing right.
Okay. That's good. The other thing is on venues. And I know there were some changes made for the venues if it was like a charitable event and those type of things. But let's just say that somebody had an event and you had a licensed person that wanted to sell at the venue. Is that something that is addressed in this?
Only through a catering license. That's the only way that can still happen.
How about if you've got, I know we had a person that was, and I think they were looking at going in that shops that you're talking about. It was a type of a wine, fruity type drink. Get the name of it, but anyway. So that person had a vendor's license in Clark County. And I don't know that they had a catering license, but they had a license that allowed them to do that. But then as through the venue, they would not be able to do that.
That's not changed. The only thing we're allowing is the manufacturer of malt beverage. It's changing the whole. So we're specifically staying away from wine because that can be handled through the farm winery program, which seems to be, we've already got two and that's not been around that long. They seem to be operating well within those confines. And it just keeps us creates a whole lot of problems for them, I think, if we start addressing wine in our ordinance. It makes it harder for the farm winery to operate. That's just my understanding of it. I may be totally wrong. My reading is, once we start, then the state has to get checked with us, and we're checking with the state. Then all our rules got to apply. It just creates no problem.
So with the breweries, my understanding is that the owner of the brewery or the licensed people in the brewery can actually go to another venue as long as that person is there, be able to sell their beer. And I think that's a state thing as well. It's,
The only thing Daniel, help me out. The only thing I recall is that if we do allow a brew pub, they can sell packaged directly to the consumer. So they would be similar to a package store, but they can only sell so many barrels a year. And they could sell to a distributor with a limit. So like Leon Farmer or Classic City could come in and buy cases, barrels of beer. And if you wanted to go get a 12-pack, you could go get one there. But you couldn't consume it on site. I don't think you can consume on site and buy the glass.
Oh, and one thing we did add, I thought was interesting. Most every ordinance you look at says you can't bring, I think, more than 2 drinks to a person at a time. But, you know, they do these samplers. So we have a provision of the ordinance that says you can get 4-ounce samplers, which is a pint.
Oh, that's light, I believe, right?
Light of beer.
that's all I have.
All right, we'll talk about this a little more next week and moving. Next item is discuss agreement for court collection services between I3 and Oconee County Probate Court. This is a annual renewal. Judge Hunsinger, very happy with the performance of the group, and he would like to continue on with this relationship. Do we have any questions on that one?
No.
You all right for consent agenda?
Yes, sir.
Do we have any public comment? Next item is discuss the Axe Building Electrical Renovation Bid Award.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. We had a set of drawings engineered for the Axe Building. It is a 59-year-old structure. There are some significant challenges with this existing wiring. So we were looking to rewire the building. After engineering and putting out to bid, we are recommending awarding the contract for replacement of the wiring to Donnelly Electric. Their bid is $82,500. In light of it being an older building, we're requesting an additional $5,000 in contingency in the budget for a total of $87,500.
Is this SPOS money or is this general fund?
Lost.
Any questions for Justin on this item? You all right for consent?
Yep.
Do we have any public comment? Our next item is the FY25 Northeast Georgia Regional Commission Aging Services Contract Renewal. Christie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. This is the yearly contract between the Northeast Georgia Regional Commission and the Oconee County Board of Commissioners and the Senior Center to provide certain services under the provisions of the Older Americans Act of 1965 for the purpose of serving older adults and disabled adults and their caregivers. Services under this contract support and allow recipients to continue to live independently in the community for as long as possible, thereby preventing premature institutional placement. The contract is for the period of July 1, 2024, and is to be completed on or before June 30th, 2025. The federal fund sources are $107,524.26. The state fund sources are $83,530.84 for a total of $191,055.10. The matching funds from the county are $8,384.65. And the recommendation is for approval with the board authorizing Chairman Daniel to sign the contract on behalf of the Board of Commissioners.
Any questions on this item? You all right for consent? Do we have any public comment? Want to move into the amendment to the SFE 2023 ARPA contract?
All right, this is an amendment to the American Rescue Plan funding contract between the Northeast Georgia Regional Commission and the Oconee County Board of Commissioners and the Senior Center. The American Rescue Plan signed into law March of 2021 provided funding to carry out the Older Americans Act. The law provided funding for meals, caregiver services, wellness services, supportive services, and efforts related to COVID-19 vaccination outreach. The ARPA contract for Oconee County provides funding for home-delivered meals, congregate meals, and the senior recreation supportive services. The original contract is for the period of January 1, 2023 to September 30th, 2024. The amendment extends the contract end date to September 30th, 2025. There is no change in funding or costs. The recommendation is approval with the board authorizing Chairman Daniel to sign the amendment on behalf of the Board of Commissioners.
Any questions? All right, for consent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comment? Next, we'll move to the Parks and Rec Custodial Services Contract.
Good evening. We started with a new custodial service contractor in July when our previous contract was up for renewal. So since July 1, we have had numerous issues and we have documented those. We have been texting, emailing, we've met with the contractor several times. And despite our efforts to try to get them to actually do what the contract requires, they have failed to do so. At this point in time, we're recommending to terminate with cause for the custodial contract with Tribon. And we are looking to go with CNC Janitorial Services. They also had bid in July. They were one of the 5 that had bid. We have utilized them in the past. They were not the lower bid. Total is approximately budget amendment would be around the $10,000 range. And this is not just for Parks and Rec. This is also for the senior center as well. Been working with Christy. She's been experiencing the same issues that we have had in her facility and within her kitchen services. So that is our recommendation. I appreciate y'all considering this evening and putting this on the agenda. It does not have to be done tonight. However, we are invoiced monthly. So if we do terminate with cause on October 31st, and I can let CNC know tonight, then they are prepared to start services November 1st. So,
Any questions
you.
for Lisa there?
Is there any monetary penalty for early withdrawal?
Not, since it's 4 calls, there'll be no penalty with termination of the contract.
Does it call for, give them any notice?
There is. We have a letter drafted. It's essentially a breach of contract on their part and failing to fulfill their requirements as part of the vendor relationship.
So there's no 30 days.
Right.
Immediate termination.
So should we act on it tonight?
Yeah, we were requesting action tonight.
We're looking for a motion to terminate the contract and go with the second bidder, CNC.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next item is discuss and consider the FY 24 year-end budget amendment.
Thank you. So our FY 24 budget amendments will carry us through June 30th and enable us to close out the fiscal year and present our final budget and our upcoming financial statements. So this year we've included a list of the requested budget amendments along with your meeting packet. So I just would like to start with the general fund and kind of walk through the goals that we're trying to achieve and how we will do that. So starting in the general fund, we have a list of budget amendments that increase both revenues and expenditures and decrease some expenditures. So that the goal of receiving more revenues than budgeted and having savings in operation lines, we're requesting to transfer funds over to the capital fund to be reserved for fund balance, future use for capital projects. So in order to do that, we're requesting budget amendments of the following line items and revenues. It's local option sales tax, property and other taxes, license and fees, grants, charges for services, fines, interest, and sale of assets. And with those increases in revenue, we would be able to transfer $5.9 million into the capital fund for future projects. We're also requesting to increase fire for equipment purchased, originally budgeted from SPOS. After reviewing documentations and prior to placing the order, we saw that the best fit for the funding source for that equipment was not a capital SPOS account, but from the general fund. That's $220,000. And then decreasing the following operational expenses will enable us to transfer the funds over to capital. That includes administration, IT, operations, juvenile, jail, animal services, public works operations, and a balance from infrastructure, recreation, and planning, all reducing those operational budgets since we had savings in those areas. Also reducing a grant match for fire that is actually going to occur in FY '25. And reducing a victim services grant match that was not needed. And then reducing general fund subsidies to the administrative building project, special revenue subsidies, E911, public works, solid waste, and let's see, and actually increasing special facility subsidy by 37,000. So all of that combined increases revenues of 4.9 million, increases expenditures a total of 3 million, and allows us to balance the budget for FY '24. There are also transfers presented under the general fund. So a transfer requires your approval when it leaves a certain category and goes into another. So if we're moving between personnel, operations, or capital, it does require your approval and not an internal process, or if it's moving between different departments. So we're requesting to use professional services from planning to cover group insurance, FICA taxes and workers' compensation to cover technical services for Superior Court. And in the Parks Department, we're requesting to increase revenue in the facility programs, our contracted programs and special events, while reducing the revenue under the program department. These transfers move within categories, and so they don't change the overall budget. And finally, we have a revenue neutral amendment, meaning that revenues and expenditures are going to increase by the same amount. And this is for our subscription-based IT arrangements. GASB 96, which our auditors spoke about last year when they came in to present the fiscal year to you, requires this adjusting entry if we have items of materiality that apply to our financial statements, and FY '24 is the first year that we have those to present. That covers the general fund. In other funds, you'll see some of those changes flow through. So if we change general fund subsidies out to other funds, then we're reducing the revenue for another fund and reducing those expenditures as well. So these other funds kind of show how those transactions flow through. And we also have some year-end adjustments that we would like to make as well. So budget amendments, we have the senior center. We're increasing grant revenues while decreasing the subsidy and increasing expenditures. That allows us to show usage of a fund balance in the senior center. We are moving sheriff funds from confiscated assets out into special revenue. In special revenue, we have a Touch a Truck program, we have Clean and Beautiful programs, and Fire Station number 7 donations and operations. We're requesting to use fund balance on those items, so you'll see decreases to revenue or increases to expenditures. Victim Services Fund, we're reducing the grant match, so we're reducing the general fund contribution in that fund. And in SPOST 2015 SPOST, we'd like to increase the budget for debt service, which is kind of a final closing entry for that GEO bond debt that was located in SPOST before we went into SPOST 2021. Again, we have transfers. In Parks and Recreation, we'd like to reduce program expenses and increase parks facility program expenses. In T-SPOST, we'd like to take funds from the operations and move them down to capital. That was to start off Atlanta Highway and Burson Avenue traffic signalization. And in hotel sales tax, we'd like to use custodial services to cover their group insurance. The revenue neutral budget amendments listed. In our other funds, a lot of times we have donations or grants or other revenues that come in throughout the year that are spent during the year. And sometimes they're not spent, so we're spending them in future years. So sometimes we'll use the fund balance for those. On special revenue, we have school crossing contributions. public safety contributions, fire donations, jail management fees, the sheriff's transfer, and that concludes special revenue, and the sheriff's transfer, all increasing revenues and expenditures for the same amounts. An opioid settlement fund, we're increasing revenues to match actuals, and then balancing that fund by increasing expenditures. In E911, you see the reduction of the general fund subsidy here, because we reduced the revenue in order to balance that fund. We also decreased the expenditures, which illustrates the savings in that fund. For grants, we received an additional $2,000 from GEMA for personnel. Found that we didn't need a GEMA match in FY '24 or the purchase of equipment in '24, since that rolled into FY '25. And we have another fire grant match and equipment reduction based on funds unused. Special district for streetlights, general fund did not have to support the full balance, so we have a reduction in budget. Hotel sales tax, we have an increase in revenue over budget, so therefore we have an increase in what we owe out to our visitors bureau each year. We have a transfer of our final cash balance in the GO bond related to the administrative building project over to capital so that we could spend those, that last month of interest on the project. It's $25. Requesting the 5.9 coming from the general fund into the assigned capital projects. And reducing subsidies in the capital fund for the administrative building project, sheriff capital projects, reducing the contribution to solid waste and the related expenditures, and increasing facility fees for the civic center and the subsidy, mostly for year-end audit, adjusting entries so that we could cover the depreciation required. And lastly, we have multi-year approvals. This is for projects that were funded or as funding was assigned for these projects in FY '24 that weren't complete. So on these few items that are listed for multi-year approvals, we're requesting budget amendments for the life of these projects as needed up to the stated amounts. These are the balances that remain on those contracts at the end of fiscal year '24. So with that, if I can answer any questions, I'm happy to.
I've got one.
Yes.
What number did you say is being transferred to the fund balance?
From general fund to capital, $5,909,230 is our request.
That's not committed funds.
That assigns the funds to be reserved for capital projects only.
We do have a list of projects that that money's assigned to. So some of it's stuff that wasn't done. Some of it's other projects that we have on the books that we needed additional funding. Okay.
Mhm. You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Is this an unusual number of adjustments?
No,
Okay.
no, it's not. In prior year, I believe we did a transfer of 9 million to capital fund. It's based on our actuals. We don't have to make that transfer. We can choose to make that transfer. So should you request not to, we wouldn't amend the budget for it. But it's not unusual.
Okay.
Mhm.
I just want to make sure I heard.
Mhm.
I appreciate you going over that. I mean, I know it's a lot of detail, but, just lets the public know what we're doing. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Do we have any public comment on this item? Melissa, are you wanting action tonight? Close it? No? Okay. You all right for consent? Next item is discuss the acceptance of the GEMA Homeland Security Cybersecurity Grant.
What's that? GOD?
Utility.
Oh. I wonder why he was standing up. Let's discuss a budget amendment for utility relocation for GDOT project 0017185.
Thanks, boss.
Yes, sir.
Evening, commissioners. This won't take too long. At least I hope not. Nah, the item I'm going to discuss here is a budget amendment for utility relocation, specifically water and sewer, at the proposed roundabout for State Route 53 in Snows Mill. This item, or as far as the road project is considered, it has been bid out by GDOT and awarded. As a part of that contract, water and sewer could be included. And with this one being a little bit too large to self-perform, we thought it best that we go that direction. So we would be paying GDOT to actually, they would pay their contractor what we're paying them to perform this work. It'll involve about 3,000 foot of water line relocation, which will include 8-inch and 12-inch, and about 500 foot of force main, sewer force main, which will be 8-inch. So I guess what the financial responsibility for us or the amendment would be for $519,095, which would come out of operation funds. This request would include all necessary budget amendments up to the contract amount for the life of the project.
Any questions for this item?
Yeah, Adams, all that work going on out there right now, like the fence relocated, is that part of the roundabout stuff that, that's been going on out there? Cause I know they've been digging some stuff and planting stuff. And I saw a bunch of flags that are inside the fence line. Is that part of the line you're talking about that's already marked out there?
Yeah, they're starting to clearing all it now, and clearing and grubbing and all that stuff. So yeah, this would include just water and sewer locations.
With this, do they follow county specifications and requirements? Or is that a DOT requirement?
They would have to, well, actually, it would have to be under state requirements as far as, but it would be utility specs, like our utility specs. But I guess, like as far as casing and all that, that would be GDOT, which they're more stringent than we are. So, yeah, we got to follow their specs.
Like for water line ductile versus plastic?
Has to be ductile. Which honestly, that's our spec too. So most of the things we share with them, we just have a little bit more discretion in the county. We don't with the state.
Any other questions? You're out for consent. Any public comment?
Thank you.
Now we can discuss the acceptance of the GEMA Homeland Security Cybersecurity Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. This was not a typo, fiscal year 22 state grant through GEMA and Department of Homeland Security, where our IT department has applied for a grant, and essentially what this would do would be have a firm examine our cybersecurity measures, procedures, policies, and make recommendations, and then hopefully off of it, purchase some equipment and update the policies to further comply with the cybersecurity measures. So the grant amount is $131,250. It does require a 10% match. $13,125 would request the Board of Commissioners to approve acceptance of the grant, which would include all the budget amendments contained therein.
Any questions? You're out for consent. Yes. Do we have any public comment? Next item is update on benefit program consulting. So health insurance, as everybody knows, is a big deal for operating a business or government. So ever since been in office trying to figure out how to have a healthier workforce, better offering with insurance for employees, and also level the curve of the growth for the expenses of health insurance. Self-funding discussions have been had since 2017. We've looked at private sector examples as well as public sector examples of going to self-funding. We're kind of we may have been a little bit too early in some of those discussions. In recent times, in the last 5 years, it's more common for smaller groups like ours to be able to go to the self-funding. So we've had a real heavy push the last couple of years looking at self-funding is the right thing to do or not. So we engaged review of our health benefit review for our operation. We got a positive finding for self-funding and that group made some recommendations on how to proceed. First would be, getting with some consultants to go a deep dive and to study the cost and benefit of self-funding. They would come in, look at our numbers and say go or no go on self-funding. And then we would get a consultant that would actually implement the self-funding program. So we did an RFP for a consultant to give us the go, no go. That result came back with go, sent out some information on what those numbers showed. Right now, we're ready for the next step, which is the benefit consultant that will lead to implementation of the program. That RFP is currently posted. We have the committee together that will review those. Maybe we might possibly could have something for y'all to look at our meeting next week. That's why I just want to kind of give you an update of where we are in case that pops in. Some of the main items for the RFP is that our benefit consultant broker would work directly for Oconee County. There'd be no other commissions, fees, or financial inducements. So we would kind of what we're asking for, what would it cost to do these items that we're asking you to do? And that relationship would be just directly with us. What we're asking them to do is help us design the plan, create the plan, manage the plan, enrollment, as well as running our wellness programs, all tied up in that RFP. So it's basically just a heads up that's out there. And if you have any questions, either now or over next week, just let me know, and happy to sit down and go through it.
Just a couple,
Yes, sir.
just off the top of my head, I assume that, staff or yourself have been in conversation with other counties that have gone this route. Have we had any conversation with any other counties our similar size?
No, we've talked to some that were smaller than us that have gone. And then not this round, but the previous round, we had a couple bigger camps that had gone. We actually talked to some of the employees there to see how the program was working, and it was very positive feedback on that. But based on two different groups looking at us, the numbers are there where this could be a benefit to the employee and the county making this change.
Now, this benefit program consultant, is that a permanent, is that like an annual review contract with
Yeah.
this consultant?
So that's why we got it set up, just like all our other contracts. It'll be a 1-year contract with up to 4 renewals, so it could go as long as 5 years, depending on performance.
So when you're talking about a permanent position, so to speak, this benefit program
Yes,
consultant,
if we pull the trigger to go self-funding, we'll definitely have to have somebody to do these items. It's not an in-house specialty that we have going that in-depth into the program. We'll definitely have to have help from this point on. I don't know that there'll be a huge cost increase, but the commission's kind of leveling out what we're paying.
that's all I have tonight. I may take you up on the offer.
Yes, sir, no problem. It's a lot of stuff. All these on the committee and we're looking at, and it's a lot of things to think about.
Two things. One, we're gonna have to put in some type of a fund balance for this so that, if you have a catastrophic claim, then that would be assessed.
Yes, so there'll be what they call the stopgap insurance, that once it reaches a certain level, there'll be a second insurance company that takes that over. And then we'll have a maximum as well. But we will have to set up some type of reserve fund. And that's part of what that consultant, they'll have to get actuaries to look at, what the projected claims are and the timing of that. There's a whole thing of encumbered but not reported claims, so you gotta put money aside for claims you don't even know about, so all that'll be part of that, setting up the plan.
So will we be underwritten by a major insurance company, or will this truly be self-funded by the county?
We'll be, I guess you'd call it a partially self-funded, because we will have that insurance that will pick up at a, I think what I'm showing, since y'all shows a $75,000 max per employee. So when we hit the 75,000, the additional is paid from a secondary insurance company. Then, once our numbers hit a maximum amount, then we have insurance that'll pick up on that. It's kind of how the, and all that may change a little bit. Once they get into the number, 75 may be too high. We may need to be 50. Or we might can go to 100. It's just hard for them to, anybody to do that until you get somebody on board. You get all the information.
Since, I mean, I'm assuming that it would just be our employees, so our pool would be relatively small, and if we had somebody that had some catastrophic health issues, transplants, cancer, those type things, that could really adversely affect our rate structure. Is there any provisions in there to handle that?
Well, you do it with a secondary insurance. And it'd be similar to what's happening to us now, right? So that's exactly what the fully insured programs do, right? They're going in, looking at the risk, deciding where you take risk, where you don't, then going secondary insurance to get that. So that, we're not necessarily looking to cut total expense. We're hoping we can reduce that curve down, and where we save money, we can either maybe make the program richer for the employee or do some additional services, whether that be on-site clinics or additional benefits.
So will our wellness be expanded?
That's the goal.
Okay.
Or brought up something. Already missed it, but if we unfortunately have several big claims, personal experience, you can think everything's going fine, and then all of a sudden you get your notice, but and even with the stopgap, let's say we have a bad, something that happens over several years, they would more than likely go up.
The secondary market will respond to your claim. Absolutely. And the people we're talking to say, you're gonna have a bad year, you just don't know when it's coming.
Believe me, I understand, I understand.
So the goal is to try to get as many those good years, when you have the surplus, you're sticking that away for the bad year. And then hopefully being able to do some additional stuff. Am I missing anything, Justin?
No, I think that's right. I mean, if you think about us operating on a 5-year curve, I'm making numbers up now. You put away 5 million a year, maybe you spend 4 million your first 2 years, then, get a 5.5 hit, but we're going to have the idea is you have this sinking fund to kind of smooth the curve and move it through there. It just brings some predictability as far as that goes. But yeah, you're correct. I mean, there are some challenging years, but it'd be the same under the fully insured model too. Those rates will also go up. Insurance companies tend to make money on things either one way or the other. So
I guess my question would be, is having a little paper where I can see it, I'm sure other colleagues would want to, that comparison. If you got 2 or 3 bad ones, tough ones that come in, and I certainly don't want anybody to experience that, but there is possibility. if it were under the same system we got now versus self-insured, what those numbers look like. Any way to look at that, what our costs would be.
Once the consultant's on board.
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
We
I don't-
we can dig down to that level. I think when they get into the nitty gritty and are able to see whoever that is and dig into where the big claims are and that type of thing. Some things we can't see as a group. But so if there's a long-term illness, they won't know who that is, but they'll be able to see that illness, and those actuaries can say, okay, this type of thing probably will cost you this over the next 5 years.
And part of it too, I would say, the analysis that we conducted or requested conducted was intentionally not tied to any business afterwards. We wanted independently to hear whether we should or shouldn't do something. John said the go, no go, and then independently open it up to markets as to, you know, the business for a consultant going forward.
So when does the clock run out for our current process versus going to a new one if we decide to go that route? I mean, is there like a period you gotta have to get all those actuals together to figure that out? I mean,
So right now,
I mean, just transition one
yeah,
day to the next.
our plan's ending on December 31st, so it'll either be, it'll have to be what they look at on those numbers. I feel like we could go, what we're hoping to do is go through a March 1st flip over, which we'd have to have 2 months continuance with our current carrier to do that. Whether all that's the wish list, that's what they're gonna have to get in and figure out. May come back and say, well, we might ought to wait 12 months to do that. Because what the bottom line is, we don't want to have any negative impact on the employee. That's been the focus of our discussions throughout the whole time.
Well, that was gonna be my comment. It's kind of a double-edged sword, you got a requirement to do this, but you also want to have benefits for the employees, because that's really what drives longevity and that type of thing.
And I'll peer back behind the curtain a little bit. We were very clear with everybody. I mean, cost containment is important. It is important, but that's not the sole driver. We're really looking to have a healthy workforce and provide a good benefit for the employees and ways to enhance that going forward. We view this as a means of achieving that, as well as a cost containment as well, but it's not just solely that.
Lot more to come.
A lot more to come.
I got one more question on that. I know in certain cases, you've got a maximum that companies will pay out. Is there going to be a maximum in this case?
Yes, absolutely.
In the primary and the secondary?
So you'll have a per person, then a organization-wide. That number will probably be higher in the beginning years till we get our fund built up, and then if things go well, and that's why we'll have to have continual support on this, is looking at that, and what the trends are and what the health insurance or health care costs are doing. Pretty complicated spreadsheet.
So is that number negotiable? The maximum number, let's just say $5 million per person, and we negotiate it to 7, 10 million.
Yeah. That's all part of it. So there'll be a calculation. Hey, we think you should have a 75 per person and a 5 million overall max. They'll go to the market, see what that costs, and that affects how much we pay. You may say, hey, we want that 75 to be 50. We say, it's all kind of back and forth.
So there also be, I know like in the private sector, you can have different deductibles. You know, and the larger your deductible, then typically it's the lower your premium. So will that be the case here, that you'll have options for that?
Yeah, so basically our deductible would be the 75,000. That was our per person. That's our deductible. Yep.
Everybody,
Yeah.
lot to learn.
All right, let's talk about a update to the sewer policy related to CCRCs.
We seem to do this every 3 or 4 years. We're right on schedule. There are 2 changes. One is housekeeping. CCRCs don't really exist anymore. The term is life plan communities. And they've kind of moved how they're regulated so that these in particular are regulated by the insurance commissioner now. It's really, you're really buying a insurance policy, if you will, when you move into one of these facilities. So we have updated all the amendments and the references so that they reflect the changes in state law, and our definitions are consistent with state law on life plan community and assisted living facility. The second change is a little more substantive. We're proposing an amendment that says that a life plan community can be located in multiple locations as long as it's operated by a single operator and it's a single community with shared facilities. So pick your, life plan community. If they wanted to have a satellite campus and bring people in to use facilities at their main campus, we would allow that for purposes of sewer policy. We have a limit of 16% at any plant, and an overall limit of 30% of the capacity. Well, I said that wrong. We got a 30% at capacity at any sewer treatment facility, and then for residential, and then 16% of that can be allocated to life plan communities and assisted living communities. So we're close to limits on all that anyway. This is a fairly minor refinement.
Any questions on this? We are for consent agenda?
Yes. If I can,
Yes.
I don't want to ask a question until I know how to ask the question.
Okay.
So I would probably,
Leave it on regular agenda?
not like for it to be on the consent agenda. If
Okay.
I can ask a question, because Daniel brought it up about the single operator and the single community, poses a question to me that
Okay.
I need to sort out in my brain.
Very good. That'll be on the regular agenda for next week. Then we have the update on the Upper Oconee Water Protection Authority Treatment Plan expansion. The Upper Oconee Water Basin Authority met for a call meeting on October 23rd. And the authority approved the parameters for the bond resolution. That parameter is the offering shall not exceed 140 million. Right now, we're at 110 million is the estimated cost. They put some buffer room in there in case there is some changes, so we don't have to come back and redo this portion. The interest rate cannot exceed 5.5%. Annual debt service cannot exceed 9.5 million. And final maturity cannot go past July 1, 2057. So that was approved. They're working on all the documents and they'll go to market. And it was decided not to go, that we're gonna make 2 offerings. The first offering will be for $75 million. And then we're at 60%. we're at 60% design, we'll get a 90% design number, and that should be a lot, and we'll know what the second offering will be. There's also going, so that next week we'll have come before us an amendment to the IGA for raw water. So as you remember, we're getting a bigger share with this change now. Barrow County was nice enough to give up some of their share to allow us in Jackson County to take some of that. So we got to make all the documents match. So we'll do that for raw water as well as the treatment plant water and the transmission. Then we'll also have to have additional supplemental contracts. What am I missing? Oh, the overall IGA for the, yeah. So right now, I think the IGA between all the counties ends in the next 5 or 6 years. And no, it was a 50-year agreement. We're already 30 into it. So we're going another 50 with debt. So we're going to extend that MOU to match up with the debt service payment. I'm raising the banks. Did I miss anything? So we'll have several action items next week for this bond offer.
It'll probably all be in one tidy resolution.
Is Jim coming to that, or you got all that?
He and I haven't talked about that. He usually does. It's a lot of meetings.
It is. Any questions on where we're at? That's just a heads up. That'll be $75 million bond offer for the authority. We do need an executive session to discuss land acquisition, personnel, and litigation.
Sure, can I ask a clarifying question, just to make sure my notes on the benefit program consultant, that wasn't on a consent agenda?
No, that was just the update.
Okay, so
The RFP's out there now. And depending on the results of that, we may bring something back to you next week.
Okay.
Motion to go into executive session to discuss land acquisition, personnel matters, and litigation.
Okay. A motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, motion carries.
Notices did not have county seal on it. So I'm gonna leave it with you to put the county seal on it.
You want me to take it, get it?
You can go ahead and replace it.
Thank you. I just want.
apologize for my language, but I'm about sick of those people going, but.
Second.
A motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Commissioner Sacks,
Motion adjourned.
we're out.